Hello and welcome. My name is Christine Perret. I'm the chair of today's IEEE hosted virtual meeting of the AR community. Thank you for joining us for today's session. You'll be getting up to speed on the topic of XAPI and learning how it can be useful for augmented reality experience developers. Today's session is the fourth of our AR community virtual meetings hosted by the IEEE to offer everyone an opportunity to attend a community meeting without traveling and to contribute to the future of open and interoperable augmented reality projects. There'll be a presentation today by Craig Wiggins, a community developer at ADL focusing on the XAPI platform and the different applications for XAPI. Before I get started with the presentation, I want to make sure you know the options that are available to you for joining. If you join through your computer speaker system, then you're fine. If you'd like to join using your telephone, find the audio pane, and then the dial-in information access code will appear. We're going to hold all questions until at the end after Craig's presentation. So if you have a question, you can simply type it in to me, Christine, and click send, and then afterwards we'll take as many questions as possible. So let's go ahead and get started. Craig, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you perfectly, thanks.
Excellent. Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. Again, my name is Craig Wiggins. I am with ADL, Advanced Distributed Learning. Before I get started, I want to call out my colleague, Jason Haag, who is also on the line. Jason, are you there? Okay.
He might be muted. Yeah.
Jason. Hello?
Hi. Jason's on the line. He's muted at the moment.
Okay. Jason is my collaborator and works with me primarily in the areas of the Experience API and mobile learning. Let's start off with what ADL is before we get into the Experience API. So ADL stands for Advanced Distributed Learning. It was created back in 1999 by a presidential executive order. There are two collabs, although there are locations throughout the world. There's one in Orlando, Florida, and one in Alexandria, Virginia. I am sitting in the one in Alexandria, Virginia right now. The goal of ADL is to provide highest quality education and training, primarily for the U.S. Armed Forces, the DoD, which we are a research and development branch, but really for the U.S. federal government and the world at large. So ADL has created a lot of, or has spurred a lot of learning technology since 1999. One of these tools will be the Learning Registry, which is literally what it sounds like. It's a registry of learning objects made available for anyone. They're all open source and all available to be used. The 3D repository, which is a website for uploading, finding, and downloading 3D models. Any 3D model can be uploaded, but the system is optimized for certain file types. It's, again, free for use, and I'd recommend checking that out if you have the time. The Virtual World Framework Sandbox is a multi-user collaborative open source virtual environment that lives in the cloud. We allow users to create worlds where they can interact, play, and build. It's actually really interesting and one of the, in my opinion, one of the underappreciated innovations here at ADL. I would recommend taking time to check that out. Possibly most importantly, ADL has created SCORM, which stands for Shareable Content Object Reference Model. It integrates a set of related technical standards and specifications to allow for accessible, interoperable, durable, and reusable content and systems. Very simply, SCORM is the way that I would say e-learning content or much learning content that lives on the web can speak to learning management systems, learning management systems being systems that manage learning objects, such as courses. And I'm going to stop there with courses because generally, when speaking of e-learning, which I'm most familiar, that's really the most important hub, the learning management system. To learn more about SCORM, please visit that URL at the bottom of the screen. I think here at ADL we call SCORM a marginally imperfect but accepted standard, although technically it's not a standard. It's just the default standard. It's what people are using around the world. So SCORM has gone through a few iterations. I would say that its most important aspect is that it provides an interoperability framework for web-based learning. So I want to pause a moment and say that the accent really is on web-based learning. When SCORM was created, the difficulty that the DoD was encountering is that they were a bunch of different standards or protocols for accessing content that would spread out through the web. A lot of the innovations that we have right now in 2015 regarding accessing things on the internet did not exist at the time. So this is strictly about things that you could find within your web browser. So just to give you a bit of a further overview of SCORM, and this will become more apparent in a little while. The model for SCORM is that content packages are imported into learning management systems, and the content is duplicated in each system. So the LMSs, the learning management systems, contain the content and really manage the learner data and control the access. It's really the hub for all learning experiences and content that you might have. As a result, I would say that learning management systems are very important to an e-learning consumption organization. I would say that it's difficult to manage the content lifecycle, but depending on what learning management system you have, this could be more or less onerous. So this worked really well, this solution. The DoD was happy. The larger e-learning community, growing at the time, now very large, was very happy. SCORM, as I said, was only intended for web-based content, and that worked well for that. The runtime environment used JavaScript, which at the time was widely used by web programmers. The SCORM data model meant that you could get a common set of data elements, like scores, whether you completed a course, whether you passed or failed. When you stopped a course, or when you stopped a course, you could pick up where you left off, and it would make note of that. So very simple bits of information about your learning experiences, but very important ones. The problem that the DoD and the U.S. Armed Services were having moving courses to other learning management systems behind firewalls, that was eliminated. So it was a success. So one of the things that's kind of changed over time is that we've started to make a distinction between traditional and next generation e-learning. So traditional e-learning really is made to be part of a formal curriculum. I think everyone's heard of the 70-30, the 70-20-10 rule. 70% of what you learn in a corporate environment or a work environment is on the job. 20% is learned, through your exposure to examples, and 10% is through formal learning. So I would say that e-learning and everything managed by SCORM, in the large part, is relegated to that 10%. However, with the newer devices and means of accessing content that we've developed over the past 15 years, I would say that next generation e-learning is looking for something that is part of that 10%, but also allows for cloud technologies and distributed services, such as Dropbox or things of that nature. Content provided using multiple technologies and multiple platforms, and promote self-guided and individualized learning. I think that's definitely a trend over the past, I'd say at least the past 10 years. And these are things that SCORM was not necessarily developed to handle. So the new generation of e-learning is looking to support things like performance support, job aids, simulations, intelligent tutoring systems, and connections to peers and mentors. Again, moving towards more individualized learning. These are things that have become more important as we've talked about learning design in the past 10 to 15 years. But I would say that technology, at least the traditional technology associated with SCORM, has not really kept up with that. That is not to say that those things have not been managed using things other than outside of SCORM, but SCORM itself has not really changed to do those things. So some of the problems that we've come up with as people use other systems to track or to create learning experiences, we want to know, how do you know if you passed a course or satisfied a competency? There's been a lot of talk about competency networks and frameworks lately, and SCORM is not really equipped to tell you, whether or not you satisfied a competency. It'll let you know whether you passed a course, or whether you failed, or whether you completed it, but not whether you're qualified for a job, or, it doesn't let a school necessarily know if you've met your degree requirements or can do certain things. These are more granular items that SCORM is not necessarily intended to report. So this image is here because I gave a speech in Korea recently, and I tried to learn Korean for the trip. It didn't work out as well as I'd hoped, but I did learn a little bit of Korean. And I have to say that SCORM, Shareable Content Object Reference Model, is a lot like my Korean vocabulary right now. I can get a lot done with my Korean if all I want to do is talk about the weather. Similarly, with SCORM, if you want to talk about passing or failing, whether you completed or didn't complete, whether you started something or what your score is, knowing these things alone gives you really an incomplete picture of a learning experience. If you want to know how you can improve your learning designs as an instructional designer, if you want to know what resources were best used or most used within a particular set of learning or performance support tools, there's really no way to know that with SCORM, really no easy way. As a result, there's not a lot of data science that's allowed to occur. So let's talk about what the Experience API is, as opposed to what we had in SCORM. First, I want to say that the Experience API is a part of a larger framework called the Training and Learning Architecture. It is the first of the 4 parts, those others being content brokering, learner profiles, and competency networks. Experience tracking is represented by the Experience API, and I would say that right now it is by far the most important and the most popular portion of that training and learning architecture. And we can talk offline or some other point about the TLA. I don't know if we have enough time to do that today. So in simple terms, the Experience API is a suite of web services that allow reporting of experiences. Now, I say experiences as opposed to saying learning experiences. It was created to track learning experiences, but in fact, it can track any kind of experiences. You can use it to track experiences, scores, progress, the experiences of teams as opposed to just individuals, which is something that SCORM would focus on. You can track virtual media and even real-world experiences, not just completions. It was developed by an open-source community through something called Project Tin Can, which I'll talk about soon. I'll talk about it right now. So ADL realized that SCORM was not necessarily keeping up with the demands of the learning development community. So we went to that community and asked, what are the requirements of a new standard or specification to deal with these new challenges? So something called Project Tin Can was born to deal with these demands. And those 5 demands were, it should support a variety of content types. It should be simple to implement. It should support offline or disconnected scenarios. And I'm going to pause here and say that's a very important distinction, at least in my mind. I know that talking to Jason, my colleague, we are focused also on mobile learning here at ADL. And increasingly, we're looking at situations where we're looking at devices that can operate and create data about experiences, or at least have sensors to do so, but they're not necessarily connected to the internet. I would say that it's there are a lot of situations in which you still want to get the experience data from such devices, but with SCORM, there's really no good way to do that. Number 4, portable content. So that would be interoperable across platforms. So that would be similar to what we had, our demand that was made of SCORM. And improved access to runtime data. So we wanted to kind of update what we had started with SCORM. So the Experience API allows for data storage and retrieval, for example, via third-party reporting and analytics tools. So what you're looking at right here is data visualization associated with some activities, and this is all enabled via the Experience API. So I want to pause for a moment and talk about how that data storage and retrieval works. Crucial to the concept of the Experience API is something called a learning record store. A learning record store is literally just a place to store learning records. So as opposed to a learning management system which handled grade books and you know, user data, you know, basically name, you know, department, things like that. It would also handle you know, booking rooms in addition to learning experience management, you know, whether someone passed or failed or completed something. The learning record store is strictly a place to put information about learning experiences. So this system goes hand in hand with XAPI. As XAPI-enabled activities generate statements, they're sent to an LRS. The LRS is simply a repository for learning records that can be accessed by an LMS or a recording tool or anything else. An LRS can live inside an LMS or it can stand on its own. So you'll see in this diagram here these XAPI-enabled activity providers, as we call them. Say whether it's a course, as was the case with SCORM, or just a web page, or a game, or a simulator, learning data about what's happening is delivered directly to the LRS and is stored there. You can see in turn things like an LMS or reporting tool can query the learning record store and then get transcripts about that learning data. So the LRS can limit who can read and write learning records, but it doesn't have to. SCORM and other e-learning standards only store a certain amount of learning data, whereas XAPI allows for the LRS to store nearly everything, which means better reporting and a much more accurate picture of learners. So you can see here that an LRS can share data. LRSs can share data among themselves, so learners and data can be transferred from one organization to another. Statements can be sent to multiple learning record stores. Think, for example, I want to record my training in my own personal learning record store, as well as my employer's learning record store. So it's a bit complicated here. We'll get back to some real-world examples in a bit. Finally, the Experience API puts gaming, mobile, and virtual worlds at play, and those aren't the only things. It basically opens the world wider than strictly page-turning courses as are presented, and as I think are standardized using the SCORM model. So looking here, you can see the XAPI in comparison to the SCORM runtime environment. So in order to accommodate the new landscape, ADL is a champion of the enterprise architecture. So the TLA is a suite of customizable pluggable services as opposed to the organization as shown on right with SCORM. So on the left, you'll see via the TLA and especially the XAPI, you'll have a learning activity on any platform. That's really important. Whereas with SCORM, you're kind of restricted to the browser-based instruction, which kind of limits what you're able to do. So you can see here when comparing that runtime environment and the XAPI, with SCORM and the XAPI, you can track bookmarking, completion, pass-fail scores. But only with the XAPI can you go on to do multiple scores per subject. With SCORM, the last score that you have is the one that is recorded. With Experience API, you can do multiple scores, you can do unlimited test results, and interactions. And I think that is really the important part. The XAPI is made to be secure, and really importantly for those of us in the e-learning industry, there is no learning management system required. Similarly, there's no web browser required. Supports offline scenarios. You control your content. It will track apps, serious games, simulations, real-world informal learning and performance, and tracks team-based learning. Now, that's of interest to certain people. One of the things that's come up or that's become more popular now is having team-based simulations or activities in the real world. And SCORM really is made to track individual achievements. So this is something that is actually made real through the Experience API. So let's get down to the heart of actually how this works. So I've talked about what the XAPI is good for, but this is what it's made of. So in simple terms, using the actor, verb, object structure of XAPI, you can report on real-world experience, such as Nicholas attended ITSEC, which is a conference, or Nicholas presented at ITSEC. Nicholas read a Steve Jobs biography. Nicholas watched the iPhone 6 launch video. So that seems like a disparate or unconnected series of events, but let's say that Nicholas attempted to watch the video War of 1812, Part 1. Then he attempted the assessment. Then he answered question 1 with true. Then he answered 90% on that assessment. Then he mastered the objective of level 1 of the War of 1812. And then he earned a level 1 badge. So this sequence here gives you a much more granular, and this is actually fairly broad, but it gives you a much more granular look at the kind of sequence of events that you can get using the Experience API. Again, whether or not he did the assessment on his iPad or via an app, or watched the video on the web, or scored a 90% on an assessment that he did on his smartphone, and then received a badge via the web. All of those things, no matter what platform they're on, all of those things can be enabled to report to a learning record store, and therefore be queried by some sort of third-party reporting tool. So by storing the experiences that our experts, wherever they are, have under their belt, we can help new learners gain the experiences they need to grow by looking at the streams of our experts. We do this currently via mentoring in the real world. So, for example, senior software engineers constantly mentor junior developers on best practices and share links about scalability or performance or the new features of languages because they already know how to stay on top of their industry. Otherwise, they would have been out of a job years ago and their knowledge would have become stale. This is informal and social learning at its best. This concept can also be applied to formal classroom or e-learning experiences, but I think this is really where the Experience API shines, talking about real-world experiences and actually allowing people to replicate them. Another thing we wanted to make sure is to talk about is that the fact that XAPI doesn't force you to filter your data. So in the past, you can see at the far end the score. That's what you get from SCORM. You can get all the stuff on the far left end: movement, responses, decisions, delays, questions, searches. Previous tracking of learning content involved that filtering. The new paradigm means bringing on big data, as they say. It also tracks stuff data. So it frees data to allow instructors to be able to see more information about what the effects of their instruction, or students to see the real results of their activities, to people maintaining systems to see actually what really works. XAPI doesn't rely on an enterprise LMS. Rather, it just specifies an LRS, which serves the dumb data. It expects that other services will integrate and create solutions around that LRS. So I'm going to skip past this. What I want to say is that XAPI allows for easier data visualizations, but we can skip that. I want to show you an example, or a couple of examples of what we're talking about. So right here, we're looking at a data flow chart for a project called Reaper. Reaper is a project from Riptide Software that they've been working on with ADL, and it concerns live shooting training on training ranges. So as opposed to using simulated shooting devices such as guns you might see at simulation conventions, etc., people are using real rifles on real training ranges and tracking data associated with the performance. So you can see here in this slide, in this view, in the shooter and coach view, people who are instructors or teaching people how to shoot properly, whether in the prone position, standing, kneeling, etc., and how best to breathe, how quick to pull the trigger, and how accurate to fire. That person who's doing that instruction can see the results of the execution of that instruction, or at least the execution of the actual shooting here, whereas the people who are researching the effectiveness can see information this way. So you can tell, for example, I think in number 1 here, that particular target was obstructed, and that was something that was discovered because you were not getting the kind of accuracy that you were on the other targets here. Another example that I'm really fond of is exposure track. So exposure track is a service to support the well-being of at-risk workers throughout their careers. So we're thinking hospital employees, chemical and refinery workers, industrial employees, firefighters, and other first responders. The ability to track and record at-risk workers' exposure to harmful substances could help improve safety protocols now and in the future. So until now, up until things like exposure track, things like this have been ad lib and really relegated to people with clipboards. Recent changes in technology, specifically the XAPI and sensor technology, are allowing individual workers to maintain control of and participate in their own exposure tracking. So the good folks at Inexol have used the XAPI to data stream information about what people are experiencing in the moment, using commercial off-the-shelf sensors to get information about their environment. And you see here an array of sensors that were used in the development of exposure track. And you can see here you can see here how the geolocation information, the information from the biosensors on people's suits, the environmental sensors, looking for heat, particulates, chemical agents, they all are tracked live using and expressed using the Experience API or TLA and API, which then trigger either training or some sort of experience or a recommendation to action. And unfortunately, I can't show you this in action. I'd have to have sensors and be in your presence at the moment, but it's really a very interesting use of the Experience API. And something that I think is very relevant to the world of augmented reality, using the Experience API to be the descriptor of the physical world. So augmented reality obviously is I don't need to tell anyone here, is the literal augmentation of the physical world through technology. I would say that that describing that physical world and reporting on the actions associated with that world, I would say the XAPI is probably the perfect language for doing that. But now that we've talked about the XAPI, I want to talk about something that Jason and I had worked on for the past couple months, which is the Experience API communities of practice. So a community of practice obviously is a group or usually connected by a common cause, role, or purpose, which operates in a common modality. The first ADL community of practice meeting was held, I want to say 3 months ago. The requirements for a COP, or at least the objectives of the group, were to generate best practices and requirements. Basically, we would learn by doing, in a sense. We were starting off with an ADL vocabulary to create an ADL COP. That was basically to create a learning profile, an XAPI profile, to replicate or do all the things you could do in SCORM with XAPI. We did that. Next, we wanted to identify other use cases, such as ebook tracking with XAPI, video tracking, tracking marksmanship, etc., and any other common use cases that we'd like to address. Those will be considered as part of the new ADL vocabulary. And then finally, we want to standardize how XAPI statements are expressed for each use case. So each community of practice collaboratively works on standardizing how specific types of use cases should be expressed using the XAPI. A good example of this is how one might track video. You could use paused or stopped or played or continue. There are many verbs you could use to express what you do with a video or what happens when people interact with video, shuttling, drag back, drag forward. But when it comes down to it, and when we're trying to work within a community and outside of community, dealing with a particular media type, it would be best if we had a common set of verbs to describe this thing. Again, my colleague Jason is actually really deep on this right now and is working on working on some best practices and a white paper to talk more about how this can best be done. So in front of you see the web page for one of our communities of practice. It is that one for the medical education, and it's associated with a group called Medbiquitous, which is a medical standards organization. The reason I have them shown on screen here is that they predated our efforts, and you can start a community of practice just by doing it, just by deciding that you want to do it. I would recommend that you visit our community of practice directory, which you can see on screen here, and you can sign up and start, you can register with ADL to start a community of practice. So you'll notice that we've got a badges one, we have a Chinese language and culture community of practice, one for courses that I described earlier, one for healthcare education, ebooks, which is a very popular one right now. The IEEE's Actionable Data Book Group had started that sometime last year and has been continued working on that up to this day. Social media collaboration, videos, as I talked about, and augmented reality. So I'm pretty excited about that. And I would say that our friends at Juxtopia were kind enough to go ahead and get an XAPI-AR program website up. So if you haven't visited that, I would do that. This is where a lot of the discussion around the confluence of XAPI and augmented reality will start to happen. So I would say that there are probably a few obvious points of discussion for XAPI and with augmented reality. First would be what that controlled vocabulary for AR-specific actions would be. I know that there are a number of augmented reality platforms, authoring platforms. Are the actions associated with creating and executing augmented reality instances, are they the same across platforms? The next thing would be to look at use cases and the best practices for those use cases. I would say that the group Medbiquitous that I was talking about earlier with the medical education community of practice, they spend a lot of time every time they meet going over their use cases and figuring out what the best practices are. And then finally, working on proofs of concept. So, there's nothing better to kind of cut off a lot of talking about what you might or might not do than actually building something or designing something and letting it loose into the world. So on that note, I'm going to talk about, say, the final piece of this, which would be the Experienced API Design Cohort, Season 3. So we've done, up to this point, I've done a lot of talking about what XAPI is and, how to get involved with trying to, set best practices. But I think a big problem that we've had, and I say this as an instructional designer by trade, is that there has been a lot of emphasis in the past 2 years with XAPI on how to build things. Really working in the spec to figure out how certain activity providers are going to communicate with learning record stores and what the standard should be. In fact, there's a XAPI specification group that meets, I believe, every week, every Wednesday, I think 2:30, to talk about the specification and what should go in and what should advance and what we should be doing. And if you are a developer and would like to sit in on those meetings, please contact myself or Jason, and we can direct you to those. But if you're a designer like me and you spend time thinking about how things should work and what you would like an experience to be, there wasn't a lot going on. So that's the problem. XAPI is a new spec that provides a new paradigm. People who worked with SCORM in the past have to think about designing in a new way. A lot of the discussion of the spec has been, about development, but not really for people who are tinkering or just kind of want to poke at it with a stick or design for it. I would say most importantly for me, instructional system design sensibilities have been shaped by SCORM, and we need to kind of reverse that, or at least get people, broaden that for people and allow them to work with the XAPI. So the solution that we came up with is learning by doing. So in the summer of 2013, ADL put out an open invitation to the learning community to participate in the first XAPI Design Cohort, or Season 1. The Design Cohort is an open, team-based applied learning experience. Teams worked together for 9 weeks, and actually that ended up becoming 14 weeks just because we wanted to keep working. We have weekly sharing or / bragging sessions and discussion about XAPI topics. The teams work on specific projects associated with the XAPI, or rather using the XAPI to accomplish certain goals within different domains. The projects vary greatly in scope and topic, and most importantly, or at least most importantly to me when I started, the teams that work on their projects retain all of their intellectual property rights. ADL would like to, ask your permission to showcase them as demos, or what you work on as demos or proofs of concept, but we have no rights to what you do. So that kind of yields the question: what does ADL get out of this program? Well, I would say two things mainly: creativity. I'm going to speak for Jason and say that we're a bunch of smart people in Alexandria and in Orlando, but we're not the smartest people in the world, and we can't think of everything. So, we don't know how a particular group or community would tackle a problem using XAPI unless we have that group or community work with the specification. Similarly, we would like your insight as to how XAPI should be used to support the DoD and the larger learning design community. So, thus far, we've had 2 design cohorts. We had one spring of last year. It was very popular. We've had a total of 400 people register, 160 participants overall, and 80 finishers. So you can see that kind of whittles down over time, down to a few people. I don't want that to scare anybody off. I just want to say that, it's definitely a commitment of time, and you're working collaboratively and usually virtually to build, to design something and oftentimes build something. So that does take a bit of time. So in the first design cohort, there were several projects. There was a WordPress plugin to evaluate knowledge. I think one of the more notable ones, the second to last bullet, was the XAPI and Twitter project, whereby people tweeting on a certain subject reported XAPI statements, which were captured using an LRS. In the next design cohort, there were several, I would say, stepped-up projects. There was an EPUB, as I said before, an ebook, an XAPI integration. That would be reporting on annotation and activities associated with reading an ebook. Those were made to express XAPI statements and then tracked by or captured by a learning record store. One group started working on XAPI and open badges, so that would be tying back to the idea of a competency framework and allowing what you would do to work for and attain an open badge would be recorded using the Experience API. Someone worked on a WordPress plugin to track embedded YouTube video user experiences. So as I said before, taking what you would do with a video, something that wasn't really easily tracked using SCORM before, and having that show up using the Experience, or having that being reported on using the Experience API. And there's a lot more. I could talk for quite a while about that. We capped off the experience in the with an XAPI bootcamp, where at the end of that we invited everybody to come down to Orlando, Florida, one of our offices, and do a few workshops on the XAPI, real hands-on stuff, and then present what they learned and what they built and what they designed. And we had a really great time, and I'm looking forward to doing it again. So in January, at the end of this month, we're going to start the 3rd design cohort. We've extended it to 14 weeks because we realized that 9 weeks definitely is not enough to get done what we'd like. We're going to try to reduce the administration and allow for more creation and implementation. And we're doing something called bounties, which I'll talk about in just a moment. First, I wanted to say that the kickoff meeting for that design cohort is next Friday, January 30th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. You can visit the link at the bottom there, and I'm going to actually put that into the chat window for everyone, so you can find that. And you can register for the kickoff meeting. However, I'm very excited for the AR community to get involved in the design cohort, so I'm open access for the design cohort to be able to register early. So if you'd like to register early, I'm going to go ahead and throw in the URL for the for that registration page, and you can do that early. Most people are not going to be able to register until the 30th, but I want you guys to get a chance to get in there early. I'm very excited to see what this community can do working with the Experience API. Now, we generally like people to wait until the 30th or attend the kickoff meeting so that you really know what you're getting into, and I recommend you do that as well, but if you'd like to get in early, please do that. You can use the link that I put into the chat window, and the password there is Season 3. All right, so that's everything for me. Overview of who I am, what we're doing with the XAPI, how you can get involved, and how you can start making things. You can contact me using the details on screen. I can also give you the details for our main office and for Jason Haag. You can contact either one of us to talk about the XAPI or the communities of practice or the design cohort, or you can just find us on Twitter. You can see my Twitter handle there on screen. That's it. Thank you.
Great, Greg. That's really a good overview, and thanks for digging into those details a little bit, introducing XAPI and the projects that have been done before. While we get started, or while people think about questions that they might want to ask, I have a few questions that that maybe you can respond to.
Sure.
I think one of the questions that people have, not everybody is writing code. There are many people who have those skills to do development, but the people who aren't developers but still might want to participate in the design cohort process. So how does that work?
Well, I have the very same question myself. So I have to say that when I started with the Experience API Design Cohort, I wasn't working in ADL. I was actually working in a different company. So I am not a developer. I'm an instructional designer, and I don't really, unlike my colleague Jason, I really don't code. My group worked on creating a vocabulary for the hospitality industry using the XAPI. So one, you can absolutely contribute to the design cohort without actually contributing a bit of code. However, what we've done in the past, especially in the last cohort, is when we are pairing up teams, getting people together who register and are unaffiliated, we put teams together, we try to mix in people who have development capabilities so that if the people in the group who are designers and are actually kind of working towards what they'd like to see, they're able to work with some really talented people and get that going. I think a really good example would be the ADB, the Actual Data Book group that worked in the last design cohort to create the ebook example. So they got together and they were paired with some people who had development skills. We had some people on the ADL staff who worked with them to kind of get them going, and they brought in artists and people to do other, development and media creation for them, and their project grew as they went on. So that's also a possibility. Well, I guess the last word to say on that is, if you have a good idea but you don't have the means to make it work, we'll help you along the way.
Okay, that's great. Thanks. And still staying on the topic of the design cohort, suppose I participate, or an individual participates in a team. Again, you made it clear that you don't have to bring the team with you. So if we do have a group of people, as we do for the AR, the XAPI and AR group at Juxtopia, we can already start with that. What happens after the season is done? What happens to you? You said that ADL can use those demonstrations and projects and draw attention to the work that's done. But what if you are working in a company and you'd like to continue?
Oh, that's definitely happened. That's already happened, which has pleased us. So if you're working with a group, and that group is within a company already, I would say that you can use the design cohort as sort of an excuse to create, to work on what you want in a low-stakes environment. If it becomes something that you want to kind of keep private. At that point, again, ADL, as I said before, has no rights to any of the intellectual property that is created in the design cohort. We will ask very nicely. I think I'll send someone nicer than myself to ask and see if it's okay if we can talk about what we've done. But if there are parts that you'd like to keep private and you want to keep working on it, that's definitely for you and your group members to work out if you'd like to. So if that's something that you'd like to do and you know that ahead of time, we've had larger companies participate in the design cohort and sort of report on things that they wanted to share with the group, but they continued to work on what they were doing in semi-secrecy, which is okay, but I think people get a lot more out of this experience that they're sharing everything. And I think there's a lot of good examples of people cross-pollinating as the design cohort goes on.
Okay, well, let's just brainstorm for a few more minutes. We got a couple minutes. Brainstorm on some of the possible bounties for XAPI projects that have to do with augmented reality. Maybe you can flip up a couple of slides to that if you or not. There we go. So it's got a dollar figure there that might mislead people a little bit. Is there a reward?
No, because we cannot. We are government workers. We cannot give you money. In fact, we cannot give you money. We cannot receive money. So that's a very good point. I should actually throw that on the FAQ. So thank you, Christine. So it is a little misleading. The difference that let me explain that first, and then we can get into the ideas. The bounties are, again, a way for us to sort of source some of the project ideas. As we've done this over the years, we've had a couple ideas of, how we want to continue, what things we'd like to see done in the space. But as we work with different communities, we find that they have their own concerns, and there are some smaller organizations or larger organizations who want to see things done with the Experience API but don't have the means to do it themselves. So we definitely we want to kind of get those ideas from those groups. If people want to, we want to present them to the people who have signed up for the design cohort, so people can decide, okay, I want to meet that bounty. That's really the concept that we're looking at. Unfortunately, we're not looking at, basically giving cash out as a result.
Right. So now better understanding the concept of the bounty, I think some of the ideas that have come to mind for me are like these. I'll give one, and then maybe you give one. So when people do use augmented reality today, they interact with lots of real-world objects, and they might want to have a record of the objects with which they have already interacted. That might be in a sequence of tasks, perhaps in a manufacturing environment. This is where I am, so don't take me backwards because I've already completed these tasks. It would, of course, identifying what the user has interacted with, the physical world object, that's inherent to the augmented reality technology. Whether it's interacting, whether it's recognizing it because there's a marker on it, or recognizing it because of its shape, other unique features of it, that doesn't have to be developed by XAPI. What I want to do is I want to make sure that that object, that my interaction with that object has been registered and do that in a consistent way over time. Is that the kind of project that you're thinking of?
Absolutely. Yeah, that would be an exemplary project in my mind.
Okay.
Definitely.
Have you got one?
Yes, actually, so I've got a variety of them. One of the ideas that I was thinking of was, and this is on the low end of difficulty, would be to take a series of actions, associated with a particular platform for the experience, a particular AR platform, and start working on a controlled vocabulary for that particular that particular platform, and then figure out, using that controlled vocabulary, verbs associated with actions, things that need to be done, things that need to be described. From there, start making, use cases in which that vocabulary actually factors in. So that's a project that doesn't require necessarily any coding per se. What could happen at the latter end of such a project would be using certain software, and again, my colleague Jason Haag has a much better understanding of these, but using software to categorize and to create a controlled vocabulary, something that can be searched and referenced. That would be very useful. And that's something that can be done over the 14-week period and then codified and then presented. And then that would be a great addition, a great first step, I think, in the community that would be combining XAPI and augmented reality.
Okay.
Another one that I would,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Another one, and I'll stop here because I know we don't have much time left. Another one that I would love to see would be the use or the creation of situated documentaries that take advantage of situated documentaries that are activated by geolocation, and then figuring out how to make that work within a certain platform. And then not only figuring out, the best way to make that work, but what the statements have to look like. And, even figuring out, even if it starts with just figuring out the data flow for that, and then creating a prototype that would show off how that would work. I think that would be a project that I would be very happy to see. But that would depend very heavily on the augmented reality expertise and chops of the people getting involved. So that might have to be an all AR community group, but it might not have to be.
Right. Well, I think you raised an important point, which is that in general, there's more people who are familiar, and there is a barrier to entry for the geospatial augmented reality tools and authoring systems. It's and that barrier keeps declining. So
yeah.
There is an awful lot of a geospatially tagged information that's visible in augmented reality, and yet we don't have a way of knowing which is most popular, which items have been interacted with or visited the most at a cross application level. So if I went and visited a particular venue or a geospatial position using my client application today, and I went to somebody else came to the same location using a different piece of software, it'd be really good if the location management company or the organization, government or whatever, knew that there was a certain amount of traffic pertaining to that particular that location. That's
right.
really, really compelling for the venues to start enriching their environment if they get something back, and even if it's not learning, it's not a strictly speaking a learning application, it is a data acquisition system.
Right, exactly. But I mean, those are the underlying platforms and things that need to be done for learning systems to be created. So yeah, I would absolutely, that sounds like something that I would love to see come out of this design cohort. So yeah.
And I think that would also dovetail well with the museums, and there's some other kinds of stakeholders that are around. Okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I mean, that's it for me. I know that Jason just mentioned in the chat talking about certain tools, BuildR in particular. I think that would be really useful. But again, pointing out that we need to define a use case first and work on vocabulary terms. It's the drudgery of XAPI, but it's the absolutely necessary portion. But we'll talk more about that next Friday. So thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope to see you next Friday at noon.
Eastern time?
Eastern time, yes. And I'm going to put my email address into the chat window just in case people missed it, and please contact me.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig, and thank you, Jason, for this episode. The archive of this meeting will be available on YouTube, and you can find a link to it also on the meeting information page. I want to thank the IEEE for giving us this opportunity to bring today's meeting. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.